Dayan stared at his computer screen for the third time that night. The numbers made no sense. Something massive had just appeared at the edge of Earth's orbit, and it was not moving like any asteroid or satellite he had ever tracked. His hands shook as he reached for his phone. The observatory in Seoul was quiet at 3:00 in the morning. Most of his colleagues had gone home hours ago. Day liked working the night shift because the stars were clearer, the data was cleaner, but tonight the data was impossible. 12 objects, each one the size of a small city. They had appeared from nowhere, breaking every law of physics he understood. He called his supervisor first, then the Korean Space Agency, then anyone who would listen. Within an hour, every telescope on Earth was pointed at the same spot in space, and received the emergency call at the Military Communications Center in Busalsan. She had been monitoring standard radio frequencies when every screen in the room went white, not static, not interference, pure white light that hurt to look at. Then a voice came through, speaking in perfect Korean and Chinese and English and every other language simultaneously. People of Earth, we are the Velrin Dominion. Your world is now ours. You have 48 hours to surrender all weapons and governments. Resistance will result in elimination. This is not negotiable. This is mercy. The message repeated 3 times, then the screens went back to normal. Hana sat frozen in her chair. Around her, other officers were shouting, making calls, pulling up defensive protocols that suddenly seemed pointless. She grabbed her radio and called General Kaihung. Kaihung was already awake when Hana's call came through. He had been in the military for 30 years, had served in conflicts that never made the news, had prepared for every possible threat. But not this, never this. He stood on the roof of the command center, looking up at the night sky. The alien ships were visible now, 12 bright points of light arranged in a perfect circle above the planet. Get me the president, Kaiyuang said into his phone, and call every base, full alert. I want everyone ready. His aide looked nervous. Sir, ready for what? We don't know what their weapons can do. We don't know anything about them. Kong kept staring at the sky. We know they think we'll surrender. That's enough. Aboard the lead vessel, Commander Wheeler reviewed the data his scanners had collected. Earth was classified as a level 3 civilization, primitive nuclear weapons, chemical propulsion, no unified planetary government, Byron standards. Conquering Earth should take less than a week. Balar had conquered 47 worlds in his career. The process was always the same. Arrive, announce dominance, wait for the inevitable surrender. Occasionally a species tried to fight, but they always gave up once they saw how outmatched they were. It was efficient, it was clean. The Veltran Wei, commander, his second officer, called out, we're receiving responses from Earth. Surrender terms already. Wheeler asked, that was fast even for primitives. No sir, not surrender. The officer looked confused. They're telling us to leave. Wheeler walked over to read the messages himself, dozens of them, from different governments, different languages, but all saying roughly the same thing. Variations of no, some were diplomatic, some were threatening. One from a small country he had never heard of simply said, come try it, this is unusual. Velter muttered. He pulled up Earth's assessment file again. Had his scouts made an error? No, the data was clear. These humans should understand They had no chance. Every other species at their development level had immediately surrendered or negotiated terms. Why were these creatures different? Prepare a demonstration. Bilar ordered. Target an uninhabited area, a mountain or empty ocean. Show them what our weapons can do. That usually convinces them. Dion watched from his observatory as one of the alien ships powered up. He saw the energy reading spike on his instruments before anything else. Then the sky over the Pacific Ocean lit up like a second sun. The beam of light hit the water and turned 100 square miles of ocean into steam in seconds. The shock wave rattled windows in Tokyo and Seoul. Dear God, Dehan whispered. His equipment was measuring energy output that should have been impossible. If they turned that weapon on a city, millions would die instantly. His phone rang. It was the space agency. Director Dan, we need you to figure out how that weapon works. Find a weakness. Anything. With what data? Duh. Hyun asked. I'm an astrophysicist, not a weapons expert. That technology is centuries beyond us. Then we have 46 hours to catch up. General stood in the emergency meeting with world leaders. Connected by video feed, the president of Korea spoke first. They have shown us what they can do. Perhaps we should consider negotiations. Negotiations. Kyle Yuang said, his voice hard. They didn't offer negotiations. They offered slavery or death. He looked at the other faces on the screens. I know what you're all thinking, that we can't win, that resistance is suicide. Maybe you're right. He paused, making sure every leader was listening. But I've studied history. Korea has been invaded more times than I can count. We've been conquered, occupied, divided. We've knelt before emperors and generals who thought we would stay down, and yet here we are, still Korean, still free, still standing. The Russian general on the screen nodded slowly. You're proposing we fight. I'm proposing we exist. Kong said, that's what we do best. Every weapon we have, every soldier, every resource, we hit them with everything. Not because we'll win, because they need to understand that taking Earth will cost them more than it's worth. Hana was coordinating communications between military bases. When the first attack order came through, she felt sick. This wasn't a war, this was extinction. But the alternative was surrender, and somehow that felt worse. She thought about her brother, her parents, all the people in Seoul going about their lives, while alien warships hung in the sky above them. She opened the channel to all Korean military frequencies. This is Communications Officer Hana. All units prepare for engagement. Code Black protocols. This is not a drill. Her voice only shook a little. Bilar was surprised when the first missiles launched from Earth, primitive chemical rockets easily destroyed by his defense systems. Then more came, thousands of them. His ship shot them down effortlessly, but they kept coming. Radio signals flooded his communications, human voices shouting coordinates, targeting data confirmations. They're coordinating. His tactical officer said, confused. Every nation is sharing data, working together. According to our intel, these humans were divided, fighting each other. Belter watched the screens. Earth's weapons couldn't hurt his ships, but they sheer volume was requiring significant power to defend against, and the attacks were coming from everywhere. Military bases, submarines, hidden silos, even civilian areas. They're not trying to win realized they're showing us they won't stop. A human fighter jet, old and outdated by Veltron standards, crashed deliberately into one of the smaller scout ships. It did minor damage, but the pilot had sacrificed himself just to prove it could be done. Wheeler felt something he rarely experienced, doubt. Back on Earth, Dehan worked through the night, analyzing every bit of data from the alien ships. He couldn't understand their technology, but he noticed patterns, energy fluctuations, weak points in their shields when firing weapons. It wasn't much, but he sent it all to General Kaio Yuang. Kaio Yuang stood in the command center, watching reports flood in. Casualties were heavy, entire bases destroyed, but the aliens were using more power than expected, taking longer than their demonstration suggested. Every minute humanity stayed in the fight was a minute they survived. Sir, an aide said, "We're receiving a message from the alien commander. He wants to talk." Kaio Yuang smiled grimly. "Good, that means we're annoying them. Patch him through." Wheeler's face appeared on the screen. "Alien and cold, your resistance is pointless. Stand down. Come down here and make us." Kung replied. The connection cut off. Hana looked at Kaio Yuang. "Sir, did we just make them angrier?" "Yes," Kung said, "but we also made them doubt, and doubt is a weapon they've never faced before. Above Earth, Wheeler called his council. The conquest of Earth should have been finished by now. Instead, these humans were costing him ships, time, and resources. He needed to understand why they fought when they had no hope of winning. One of his scholars, an elder named Morin, requested permission to speak. "Commander, I suggest we review the ancient records. There may be something about this planet we've missed." Wheeler nodded. "Do it. I want answers before we proceed with full assault." As Morin left to search the archives, Wheeler looked at Earth spinning below. Such a small world, such primitive creatures. Why wouldn't they just accept the inevitable? He didn't yet understand that he was asking the wrong question. The right question wasn't why humans fought, it was why they were capable of fighting, and the answer to that question would terrify him. The third day of the invasion began with fire. Felt warships descended on military targets across the globe, turning bases into craters with their terrible weapons. General Kaio Yuang watched from his bunker as Seoul's defense systems tried desperately to hold back the assault. Missiles exploded harmlessly against alien shields. Fighter jets fell from the sky like burning leaves, but humanity kept fighting. Every destroyed base was replaced by guerrilla fighters. Every fallen soldier was mourned by 10 more who took up weapons. Kaio had seen stubbornness before, but this was different. This was spite. Humanity was saying, "If you want our world, you'll have to pry it from our dead fingers." In Busalsen, deep underground, a different kind of battle was being fought. Tong sat surrounded by ancient texts, religious manuscripts, and mythology from every culture on Earth. He was a historian, not a soldier, but General Kaiwung had asked him to research something strange. Reports were coming in from captured alien communications. The Veltrans kept using a phrase that their translators couldn't properly interpret, something about the marked ones or the defiant bloodline. Tong had found references to similar concepts in human mythology. Stories of rebellion against the gods, Prometheus stealing fire, Lucifer refusing to bow, the serpent offering knowledge, humans who defied divine authority and paid terrible prices, but these were just stories, weren't they? Young me worked 3 levels below Tong in a laboratory that had been built to survive nuclear war. Now it had to survive something worse. She was a bioengineer and her current assignment was impossible. Find a biological weakness in the Veltran invaders. The problem was that biology was completely alien. Their cells operated on principles that shouldn't exist. Their DNA was structured in ways that defied everything she had learned, but young me had noticed something odd. The Veltron soldiers they had captured seemed psychologically fragile. When separated from their command structure, they became confused, almost catatonic. They couldn't make decisions without orders. It was as if independence itself was foreign to them. They're not built for chaos, young me muttered to herself, making notes. They need order. Structure, commands above ground, Hana. Coordinated communications between scattered resistance cells. The military chain of command was falling apart as bases were destroyed, but somehow the fighters were still organized. Civilians had joined the fight, using everything from hunting rifles to homemade explosives. Old women taught young soldiers how to make Molotov cocktails. Children ran messages between groups. When radios failed, it was messy, it was chaotic, it was very, very human. Hana received a message from General Kyle. We've captured a Velen officer, bringing him to your location for interrogation. Maybe we can learn something useful. The Veltran officer was named Jinho, or at least that was the closest human pronunciation of his designation. He sat in the interrogation room, his gray skin looking pale under the fluorescent lights. His large eyes showed no fear, only confusion. Why do you fight? Jinho asked in perfect Korean. Your survival rate decreases with every hour. Logical beings would surrender. General Kaihong sat across from him. Maybe we're not logical. All intelligent species are logical. It's a requirement of advancement. You must see patterns, calculate outcomes, make rational decisions. Your resistance is not rational. Kong leaned back in his chair. Let me tell you a story. 1300 years ago, my country was invaded by one of the largest empires in history, Mongol warriors who had conquered half the known world. They should have crushed us in weeks. Instead, we fought them for decades. We lost battles, we lost cities, we lost thousands of lives, but we never stopped. Jinho listened, his head tilted in confusion. 400 years ago, we were invaded again, then occupied by another empire. They tried to erase our culture, our language, our identity. 70 years ago, our country was split in half by war. We've been conquered, divided, occupied, and nearly destroyed more times than I can count. Kayon smiled coldly, and yet here I am speaking Korean in Korea, defending Korea. So you tell me, officer, how is logic worked out for our enemies? Jinho had no answer. The data didn't make sense. Species that lost battles of this magnitude gave up. It was universal law. Yet these humans continued. Meanwhile, aboard the command ship, Elder Morin stood before Commander Wheeler with ancient data tablets in his hands. His expression was grave. I found references to this planet in the Forbidden Archives, Morin said quietly. Earth was supposed to have been destroyed eons ago. Balar looked up sharply. Destroyed by whom? By the Divine Council itself. Morin activated a Holographic display showing text in Aldrin script, approximately 50,000 years ago, one of the creator beings violated the cosmic accords. It created a species without built-in limitations, without hierarchical coding, without obedience protocols. That's impossible. Felter said, every intelligent species has natural structure, pack leaders, hive minds, logical hierarchies. It's how civilization forms except humans. Morin pointed to the data. This rogue creator gave them something forbidden. Unconstrained choice, free will without divine limits, the ability to defy even their own nature. Bilar felt cold. What happened to this creator? Destroyed, erased from existence for the crime of making chaos incarnate, and humanity was meant to be eradicated too, but Earth was remote, barely catalogued. Somehow it was overlooked. Morin looked at Velar with ancient eyes. Until now, below in the Busalson bunker, Tiang made a connection. He ran through the corridor to Youngmi's lab, nearly tripping over equipment. Look at this. He spread papers across her workstation. Every major human mythology contains the same story. A divine being gives humans something forbidden: fire, knowledge, choice, and every time that being is punished by the gods. Youngmi looked at the papers, then at her biological scans of the Veltrans. What if it's not mythology? What if it's memory? What do you mean? Your myths say humans were given something the gods didn't want us to have. My research shows the Veltrons are biologically programmed for obedience. Their brains literally can't handle making choices without authority. Youngmi pulled up brain scans, but human brains were wired for independence, for defiance. We can override every survival instinct if we decide to. We choose to die rather than submit. Tong sat down heavily. We're not just different, we're forbidden. Exactly, and if these invaders know that, they looked at each other in horror and excitement. If the Velrans understood what humans really were, they might leave, but they might also try harder to destroy Earth completely. General Kang received their report while coordinating a resistance attack on a landed transport. He read it twice, then called Hana. Get this information to every human resistance cell, every government still operating, everyone. His voice was hard. If we're going to die, we die knowing what we are. We're not just fighting for survival, we're fighting because we're built to fight. It's in our DNA. Hana sent the message out on every channel. Within hours it spread across the planet. Humans who had been wavering, who were considering surrender, suddenly understood they weren't weak for fighting a hopeless battle. They were doing exactly what they were created to do: defy the odds. The resistance intensified. Veltran supply lines were sabotaged. Landed troops found themselves ambushed by enemies who refused to follow logical military tactics. Humans hid in cities, used hostages, fought from schools and hospitals. Nothing was off limits. Nothing was too costly. Aboard the command ship, Velar reviewed casualty reports with growing concern. He had lost 12 ships, hundreds of soldiers. His fuel reserves were depleting faster than planned. The invasion was supposed to be over by now, sir. His tactical officer reported, we're intercepting human communications. They know about the forbidden creation. They know what they are. Bilar felt something close to fear, and their response there. Celebrating, sir. They're calling themselves children of chaos, and the Divine mistake, it's making them fight. Harder, Morin entered the bridge, looking older than his centuries. Commander, I found more records, 23. Different civilizations have attempted to conquer Earth throughout history, not recently, thousands of years ago when humans were even more primitive, and Feller asked, though he suspected the answer, none of those civilizations exist anymore. Morin pulled up the data. The oldest record is from the Korvath Empire 16,000 years ago. They landed on Earth with superior technology. Within 300 years, their entire empire had collapsed from internal rebellions. The historical analysis suggests that captured humans spread the concept of free will to Korvath slaves. The idea infected their civilization like a virus. Wheeler stared at the data. Disbelief. You're saying humans are a mimetic hazard, that exposure to them causes social collapse? I'm saying they're exactly what the Divine Council feared, a species that can turn any other species against its own divine programming simply by existing near them. Morin looked tired. We shouldn't be here, Commander. This planet should have remained undiscovered. In the Busausen bunker, young me was working on something new. If humans were biologically programmed for chaos and independence, could weaponize that. The war entered its second week and Earth was dying. Cities burned, oceans boiled. Where Velen weapons struck, the death toll climbed into the millions, but the planet still fought. Every bombed city became a maze of guerrilla fighters. Every destroyed base was replaced by hidden cells that struck from shadows and vanished like smoke. Commander Wheeler no longer slept well. His fleet had conquered 47 worlds, and most battles lasted less than 3 days. Earth should have fallen in hours. Instead, his forces were ground down in a war of attrition against enemies who used tactics that made no logical sense. Suicide attacks, civilian uprisings, soldiers who fought to their last breath instead of surrendering when clearly beaten. The humans had captured several more Veltran soldiers. Wheeler watched the interrogation feeds, trying to understand these creatures better. One human soldier captured after a failed assault was being questioned by a Veltran intelligence officer. The human's name was Jin Ho. He sat calmly, despite his injuries, blood drying on his uniform. The Veltran interrogator loomed over him. Your forces are broken, the interrogator said. Your cities are ruins. Why do you continue? Jinho smiled through split lips. Let me tell you about my people. 3,000 years ago we built great kingdoms. They fell. 2,000 years ago we were invaded by warriors from the steppes. They conquered us. We survived. 1,000 years ago we were invaded again and again and again. He leaned forward despite the pain. We've been conquered by Mongols, Chinese dynasties, Japanese empire. We've been colonized, divided, occupied. Our language was banned. Our names were taken. Our culture was nearly erased. The interrogator looked confused. Then, you should understand defeat. You should know when to submit. Submit, Jinho laughed, and it sounded like breaking glass. We're Korean. We don't know what that word means. Every conqueror thought they had won, and where are they now? Gone, fallen, forgotten. But Korea, he tapped his chest, still here, still speaking Korean, still existing out of pure spite. He locked eyes with the interrogator. You're just the latest. A very long line, and you'll end the same way they did. The interrogator sent the footage to Wheeler with a note. There Psychology is aberrant, they view historical defeats as victories. They should have developed learned helplessness. Instead, each failure makes them more resistant. Wheeler forwarded the footage to arch-scholar Kelvex, the Veltrin High Council's chief historian. If anyone could explain this madness, it would be him. In an underground resistance base beneath the ruins of Seoul, Suman planned her next attack. She had been a simple teacher before the invasion. How she led 50 fighters armed with stolen Veltran weapons and human ingenuity. They had learned to predict patrol patterns, exploit gaps in alien defenses, and disappear before reinforcements arrived. They're predictable, Suman explained to her team, drawing in the dirt. They follow doctrine. They can't improvise. When we hit them here, they'll respond exactly like they did last time. Which means we'll be waiting here, she marked. Another spot. We lost that base 3 days ago. They think we're scattered and broken. They're wrong. We're everywhere. They're not looking. Her second in command, a former engineer named Wu Jin, looked worried. Every attack costs us lives. We can't sustain this. We don't need to sustain it, Suman said quietly. We just need to make them bleed until they leave. They can kill us all, but they can't make us stop choosing to fight, and that's the difference. Halfway across the world, Dayan made a breakthrough. He had been studying captured technology for days, trying to understand how their systems worked. The technology was centuries beyond human science, but it followed rules. Everything followed rules, and rules meant patterns. Patterns meant weaknesses. Their shields operate on a fixed frequency rotation, Dean explained to General Kaiwung via secure video link. They cycle through defensive configurations based on predictable algorithms. If we time our attacks during the transition phases, we can penetrate their defenses for 3 seconds. Kaiwung raised an eyebrow. 3 seconds. That's not much time. It's enough to get a missile through, or a kamikaze drone, or a very brave pilot. Defian pulled up the calculations. I'm sending this to every resistance cell. If everyone attacks during the same transition window, we can hurt them, really hurt them. Kaiwung nodded slowly. The cost will be high. The cost is already high, sir. At least this way we're buying something with it. Aboard the Veltran command ship, arch-scholar Kelvex presented his findings to Commander Wheeler. The old scholar's hands trembled as he displayed ancient records that should have been destroyed. Commander, I searched the forbidden archives dating back 20,000 years. Earth appears in 16 different historical records, all marked with the same warning: quarantine world, do not engage. Wheeler felt cold. 16 civilizations knew about Earth. 16 civilizations that were foolish enough to ignore the warnings. Kelvec pulled up the first record, the Korveth Empire. 16,000 years ago, they sent a colonization fleet to Earth when humans were still using stone tools. The fleet never reported back. 3 centuries later, the Korveth Empire collapsed from internal rebellion. The final message from their capital world described slaves who had learned the concept of choice and infected the entire population with it. Wheeler stared at the data. You're saying Stone Age humans destroyed an interstellar empire, not destroyed. Converted. Kelvec pulled up another record, the Gen Collective. 12,000 years ago, they attempted to integrate humans into their hive mind. The humans resisted, not just failed to integrate, actively resisted. The gene records describe it as mental warfare. Human minds corrupted the hive with individualistic thoughts. The collective fractured into civil war within decades. Record after record appeared, empire after empire. Some had tried to conquer Earth, some had tried to study it, some had merely made contact. All of them were gone now, fallen extinct, and the common thread in every record was the same: exposure to humanity spread like a disease. The idea of free will, of choosing your own path, infected every rigid society it touched. The most recent attempt was 6,000 years ago. Kelvec said, his voice shaking. The Divine Council sent a war fleet to sterilize the planet. That fleet was never heard from again. After that, Earth was marked as forbidden territory. Its location was supposed to be erased from all star charts. Then how did we find it? Veller asked. Our scouts stumbled across it by accident 3 years ago. They didn't know the history. They just saw a primitive world ripe for conquest. Kelvex looked at Velter with ancient eyes. We should have left it undiscovered. Young Me worked day and night in her underground laboratory. She had developed something unprecedented. Chemical compound that wouldn't kill the Veltrons but would alter their brain chemistry. It would interfere with their ability to follow orders without questioning them. It would introduce doubt where there should be certainty. It would make them think for themselves, even if just for a few moments. Taeyong called it weaponized free will. It's ready, Yumi announced to the Resistance Council, but deployment will be difficult. We need to get it into their life support systems. That means infiltrating their ships. General nodded. I have volunteers, people ready to take one-way trips if it means a chance to win. It won't win the war, Young Me cautioned. It will just make them uncertain, confused. They might make mistakes. Mistakes are all we need. Kai Wung said, humans are very good at exploiting mistakes. The coordinated attack happened 3 days later, using De Hune's calculation. Resistance cells across the planet struck simultaneously during the Velen shield transition. Windows, missiles punched through defenses that should have been impenetrable. Drones crashed into weapon systems, and in the chaos 3 human teams infiltrated landed Veltran vessel. Summon led one of those teams. They fought their way through corridors filled with confused aliens who had never expected ground combat. The Veltrans were trained for ship-to-ship warfare and orbital bombardment, not close quarters fighting with enemies who used knives when bullets ran out. Plant the charges, Suman shouted. Wu Jin ran to the life support system, attaching canisters of Young Me's compound. They weren't explosives. They were something worse, doubt in gas form. The team fought their way out, leaving behind a dozen dead comrades, but the canisters released their payload into the ship's atmosphere. Within hours, Veltran soldiers aboard that vessel began questioning orders. Why were they here? Was this invasion truly necessary? What gave them the right to destroy another species? These thoughts were poison to minds built for obedience. Some soldiers froze, unable to function without certainty. Others began arguing with their commanders. The ship's efficiency dropped by 40%. Bilar watched in horror as 3 of his vessels reported similar symptoms. His doctors couldn't find a disease. His technicians couldn't find a weapon, but his soldiers were becoming human. Questioning, doubting, choosing, sir. His tactical officer reported, voice shaking, we're receiving a message from the home world. The invasion fleet needs to return. Our territory is falling. Wheeler looked at the tactical display. He had started with 12 ships. The Veltran fleet hung in orbit like dying stars. Preparing to leave, Commander Wheeler stood on his bridge, watching Earth spin. Below, 16 days of fighting, 9 ships remaining from his original 12. Thousands of soldiers dead or infected with human ideas. His home world burning under invasion while he wasted resources on a planet that refused to die, but something stopped him from giving the final retreat order. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the growing doubt in his own mind, the infection that young Me's compound had started, or maybe it was the message that had just arrived from Earth, a single transmission sent from General Kung on an open channel so all ships would receive it. We need to talk. In the Busausen bunker, deep beneath the ruins of Seoul, an impossible meeting was being arranged. Kyung stood in the command center, surrounded by officers who thought he was insane. Talk to them, Hana said in disbelief. Sir, they've killed millions of us, and we've killed thousands of them, Kyo Yuang replied calmly. War is talking, just with worse vocabulary. I want to try actual words. A young diplomat named Bora stepped forward. She had been a translator at the United Nations before the invasion. Now she was one of the few people left who believed diplomacy could work. I'll speak to them, General, if they agree to talk. Wheeler accepted the meeting request against his council's advice. He chose a neutral location, the ruins of a Velron transport that had crashed into the Han River. Both sides would send representatives. No weapons, no tricks, just talk. Bora arrived with a small security team led by a special forces operative named Minyu. They climbed through the wreckage of the alien ship, stepping over bodies of both species. The smell of death was everywhere. Bilar met them in what remained of the ship's medical bay. He was larger than Bora expected, his gray skin marked with battle scars, his eyes reflecting light like mirrors. He studied the humans with the caution of a predator facing something it didn't understand. You wanted to talk, Bilar said in perfect Korean. Talk. Bora took a breath. She had prepared a speech, diplomatic words carefully chosen, but seeing the alien commander in front of her, seeing the exhaustion in his strange eyes, she abandoned her script. Why do you conquer? She asked simply. Belthar seemed surprised by the question. Because it is our purpose. The divine order created all species with roles to fulfill. Some species farm, some build, some explore. The Veltran Dominion conquers and brings order to chaos. That's not a reason, Bora said. That's programming. Why do you personally choose to conquer? I don't choose. I obey the divine will. Bilar's voice held certainty, but Bora saw something flicker in his eyes. Doubt. Choice is chaos. Structure is civilization. This is universal truth. Then you're not alive, Bora said quietly. You're a machine. We choose. We decide. We look at a situation and say yes or no based on what we want, not what we're told. That's what makes us human. Belthar was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, uncertain. How do you function like that? How does civilization exist if everyone chooses their own path badly? Bora admitted with a sad smile. We fight each other Constantly, we disagree, we make mistakes. We fail over and over, but we also create beautiful things, art, music, love, sacrifice. We die for ideas that won't benefit us personally. We save strangers, we forgive enemies. She looked directly at him. We're talking to you now instead of just trying to kill you. That's a choice. Back aboard the Veltron command ship, Elder Morin watched the conversation through surveillance feeds. Around him, young Veltron soldiers crowded the screens, listening. The compound young me had created was spreading further than anyone realized. These soldiers were asking questions they should never ask. If humans choose, one young soldier whispered. Why can't we? Morin said nothing. He was asking himself the same question. On Earth, Minyu and his team watched the perimeter while Borat talked. They saw Veltron soldiers on the other side doing the same, but something was different. The aliens were watching their own officers with suspicious eyes. The rigid discipline was cracking. Minyu had seen this before in human armies on the verge of mutiny. We need to be ready, Minyu whispered to his team. If those soldiers turn on their commanders, this could get messy. But the Veltron stayed quiet, just listening, learning, choosing to hear instead of shoot. Valar studied Bora carefully. Your species should have surrendered. Every calculation said you would lose, yet you fought. Why die for a choice that leads to death? Because living on our knees isn't living, Bor said. Because we decide what our lives mean. Because freedom is worth dying for, even if it's just the freedom to say no. She paused. You came here to conquer us, but you're starting to question whether you should. That thought, that doubt, that's you becoming free. Bethar laughed bitterly. I'm infected, corrupted. When I return to the Divine Council, I'll be executed for failure and contamination. Free is another word for dead. Only if you go back, Minyu said from his position by the door. You could choose not to. Every Veltron in the room turned to look at him. The concept was so alien. They couldn't process it at first. Not follow orders, not return home, simply refuse. That's desertion. Feller said. My entire species would hunt me. Yes, Minyu agreed. Welcome to freedom. It's expensive. In the Busausen bunker, de Hun monitored the meeting while simultaneously tracking something terrifying. Long-range sensors had picked up new signatures entering the solar system, not Veltran ships, something older, bigger. The energy readings were orders of magnitude higher than anything the Veltrans had. General Dei called Kaoyuang urgently. We have incoming multiple contacts. They're not Veltran. Kaoyuang felt ice in his stomach. The Divine Council. If they are, we're in serious trouble. These ships make the Veltran fleet look like toys. Kong immediately sent a message to Bora's team. The meeting had just become more urgent. Whatever happened next, humanity needed allies, even if those allies had been enemies 16 days ago. Bora received Kaoyuang's message and showed it to Velter. The Divine Council is coming. They're coming to finish what you started. Velar checked his own sensors and confirmed. His officers were panicking. The Divine Council never left their throne worlds unless the situation was catastrophic. They were coming to eradicate Earth completely, and probably to eliminate his contaminated fleet as well. They'll kill all of us, Bilar said quietly. Human and Veltran alike. You infected my soldiers with choice. That makes us as dangerous as you. Then make a choice. Now, Boris said urgently, right now, do. You keep following orders that will lead to your death, or do you choose something different? Wheeler looked at her, then at his own soldiers watching through the surveillance feeds. He thought about 16 days of fighting creatures who refused to give up. He thought about the doubt growing in his mind like a disease or an awakening. He thought about returning home to execution or staying to fight gods. What are you offering? He asked. Alliance. Boris said, stand with us. You tried to conquer us. We should hate you, but we know what it's like to be crushed by tyrants who think they own you. Stand with us and maybe we both survive, or at least we die choosing to fight instead of dying on our knees. It was the most human thing had ever heard, offering alliance to an enemy, forgiving the unforgivable, choosing possible death with dignity over certain death through obedience. He made his choice. Attention. All Veltran vessels. Wheeler broadcast on all channels. We are not leaving Earth. We are not returning to face execution. The Divine Council is coming to destroy us all. I am making a choice they taught us never to make. We stand with humanity. We fight the gods. Silence followed, then slowly, one by one, his ships acknowledged, not all of them. 3 ships broke formation and tried to escape the system, but 6 remained. 6 ships worth of soldiers choosing rebellion over obedience. Elder Morin appeared on Wheeler's screen, tears running down his gray face. I never thought I'd live to see our people choose. Thank you, Commander, for freeing us before we die on Earth. General Kyung watched the impossible happen. The Veltran fleet was repositioning, joining Earth's defensive formations. Combined human Veltran forces preparing to face enemies that had destroyed civilizations for millennia. Hana coordinated communications between the 2 species. It was chaos, translation errors, cultural misunderstandings, felt tactical doctrine clashing with human improvisation, but slowly they found a rhythm. The Veltrans had superior technology. Humans had tactics that didn't follow any rules. Young Mi and Veltron scientists worked together, sharing data. The Hun and Veltran engineers tried to integrate weapon system. Humans resistance fighters taught soldiers how to think without orders, how to improvise, how to break rules. Minu led combined strike teams in preparation for ground assault. The gods are coming, he told a mixed group of humans, and they think we'll bow, they think we'll accept our place, but humans don't bow. And you chose not to bow anymore, so let's show them what happens when slaves remember they can stand. T researched everything available about the Divine Council. They were ancient, powerful. They had ruled the galaxy for millennia. By giving each species a role, the Divine Council's fleet descended like falling stars, 7 ships each one, ancient and terrible, carrying weapons built when Earth was still learning to make fire. They positioned themselves in orbit, forming a perfect geometric pattern around the planet. It was beautiful and horrifying at the same time. Commander Wheeler stood on the bridge of his flagship, now positioned alongside human defense satellites and makeshift battle stations. His crew worked beside human engineers, their gray fingers and human hands operating controls side by side. 3 days ago, this would have been unthinkable. Now it was survival. They're powering weapons, Dean reported from his position, monitoring energy signatures. The astrophysicist had become Earth's Primary sensor operator, those readings are impossible. They're generating enough power to sterilize the entire planet's surface. General Kaiwung stood in the command bunker in Busausen, watching tactical displays show the impossible odds: 6 Veltron ships and humanity scattered forces against 7 Divine Council vessels. Mathematics didn't favor them, but humans had never been good at mathematics when it came to giving up all forces. This is Kong. We're outnumbered, we're outgunned. We're probably going to die. He paused, looking at the faces around him. Hannah, at communications, Young Mai preparing her biological weapons. Tisung, reviewing ancient strategies. But they don't know what it means to fight people who have already decided death is acceptable. Make them pay for every inch. Bora opened a final communication channel to the Divine Council, knowing it was probably pointless, but humans always tried talking before dying. It was part of what made them human. Divine Council, this is Earth's diplomatic representative. Why are you doing this? We've never threatened you, we just want to exist. The response came in a voice that sounded like grinding planets. You are the forbidden creation. Your existence violates cosmic order. You were marked for deletion 50,000 years ago. This is not war, this is pest control. Pest control. Bora felt anger rising. We're sentient beings. We think, we feel, we love and hate and dream. You don't have the right to delete us. Rights are granted by the divine order. You have no rights. You are chaos incarnate. Every species you touch becomes infected with your defiance. You turn order into anarchy. You must be eliminated. Tyson listened to the transmission and suddenly understood. They're not killing us because we're dangerous militarily. They're killing us because we're dangerous. Ideologically, we make other species ask questions they're not supposed to ask. Like why they should obey gods. Yumi said exactly like that. The Divine Council ships opened fire. Beams of pure energy lanced down from orbit, targeting military installations and cities alike. But Earth had learned from fighting the Veltrans. Civilian populations had been evacuated to underground shelters. Military forces were scattered and mobile. The first strike destroyed infrastructure but killed fewer people than the Council expected. Human and Veltran ships launched counterattacks. Missiles and energy weapons struck Divine Council shields, doing minimal damage but proving that the gods could be touched, and if they could be touched, they could be hurt. Velar coordinated the fleet movements using Velron tactical precision combined with human unpredictability. Attack pattern Delta 7, he ordered, then immediately changed it. Wait, cancel that pattern. Omega 2, no, actually just hit them randomly. Concentrate fire on their weakest shield, then switch targets when they adapt. His tactical officer looked confused. Sir, those aren't standard tactics. I know, feller said with something that might have been a smile. I'm improvising. I think I'm starting to understand what humans mean by jazz. On the ground, Suman led her resistance fighters in a desperate gambit. One of the Divine Council ships had landed to deploy ground troops. Gods wanted to claim Earth personally, to walk on the planet they were sterilizing. It was pride. It was ritual. It was also a mistake. They think we're already beaten, Suman told her team. They're not taking us seriously. Let's remind them why that's a bad idea. Mean you special forces. joined Suman's resistance, combined. Human strike teams moved through the ruins of Seoul using guerrilla tactics against enemies who had never faced guerrilla warfare. The Divine Council. Soldiers were powerful, armored in technology beyond understanding, but they followed predictable patterns. They expected enemies to face them directly. Their gods, Minyu explained to a young Veltran soldier fighting beside him. They're used to people worshipping or running. They don't know what to do with people who just shoot them in the back. The Veltran soldier, who 3 weeks ago would have found such tactics dishonorable, nodded and planted explosives on the approach route. He was learning above the planet. The space battle intensified. Human ships sacrificed themselves to create openings for Veltran vessels. Veltran ships provided cover for human fighters. It was messy, it was improvised, it was nothing like proper military tactics. It was working. One Divine Council ship took critical damage and retreated from orbit, not destroyed but hurt. The gods could bleed. Hana coordinated communications across the battlefield, translating between languages and tactics in real time. She heard a transmission from the Divine Council command ship meant for internal communication but intercepted by Earth satellites. The humans in are cooperating efficiently. This was not predicted. The Veltran defection should have been impossible. Recalculating probability matrices, they're confused. Hana reported to Kaiyuang, they don't understand how we allied with our enemies. Kong laughed, a harsh sound. Of course they don't. They think beings can only exist in hierarchy. They can't comprehend that we'd rather fight beside former enemies than bow to gods. The battle raged for 3 days. Earth cities were reduced to rubble. Millions died in the bombardment, but Earth's forces adapted to every tactic the Divine Council used, and slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. Young Mi's biological weapon, adapted within help, was deployed in a desperate strike. Human pilots crashed ships filled with the compound into Divine Council vessels. It didn't kill the gods, but it made them doubt, and doubt is fatal to beings who rule through absolute certainty. Divine Council soldiers began questioning orders, not refusing them yet, but hesitating, asking why, wondering if there might be another way. The infection was spreading. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening across the galaxy. The broadcasts of Earth's resistance, transmitted by Veltran rebels, were reaching other species that had served the Divine Council for millennia, and those species were asking dangerous questions. Why do we obey? What if we chose differently? What gives the Divine Council the right to rule us? Rebellion sparked on a 100 worlds, small. At first, a factory refusing quotas, colony ignoring directives, but small sparks can start great fires. The Divine Council received reports of uprisings and realized their worst fear was coming true. Earth wasn't just resisting, Earth was teaching resistance. The idea was spreading faster than they could contain it. On Earth's surface, inside the landed Divine Council ship, Suman's team fought through corridors heading for the command center. They lost half their people getting there, but they made it. The Divine Council commander was an ancient being, tall and terrible. He looked at the humans and Veltrans who had invaded his ship with something like confusion. You cannot win, he said. Even if you kill me, the Council will send more ships. You are delaying the Inevitable, maybe, Suman replied, raising her weapon, but we're really good at being inevitable problems. She shot him. The commander fell, not dead. His armor was too strong but wounded, and the sight of a wounded god sent shock waves through every being that witnessed it. In orbit, Dijon noticed something. The Divine Council ships are receiving messages from their home territories, a lot of messages, urgent ones. Veeler intercepted some of the transmissions. Their empire is burning. Rebellions everywhere. They're requesting fleet support to suppress uprisings. They're losing control, Kung said quietly, not just of Earth, of everything. The Divine Council faced an impossible choice: stay at Earth and risk losing their entire empire to rebellion, or abandon Earth and admit defeat the species they had come to exterminate. The Council chose retreat, not because they lost militarily, but because they lost ideologically. They couldn't afford to fight Earth while their own subjects were learning to say no. The remaining 6 Divine Council ships withdrew from Earth's orbit. They broadcast one final message: this is not over. We will return. Order will be restored. Bora responded, we in LT Unk and GT LLB here, and will still be saying no. The ships vanished into the dark between stars. Earth was saved, not through superior strength, but through the simple act of refusing to die quietly. The aftermath was terrible. Half of Earth's population was gone. Cities were ruins. Infrastructure was destroyed. The cost of defiance had been paid in blood and ash, but Earth was free, and so were the Veltrans who chose to stay. Veeler stood beside Kaoyuang in the ruins of Seoul, looking at the devastation. My people have no home now. The Divine Council will hunt us. Your people have every reason to hate us for what we did. Yeah, Kaoyuang agreed. You killed millions of us. We should hate you. He paused.